Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Healing Overflow with Dr. Toy's Social Work Podcast. It's so good to see you. I'm so glad that you came back to join us one more time, and then again and again and again. Today, you can see I have a podcast table full of people. I can't wait to introduce my guests, but before I do, I want to remind you, you can see brand new and past podcasts every first and third Thursday. Click on the Linktree link or go to all the different pages like YouTube and everywhere, y'all. I'm everywhere. I can't even brag about it, but you can watch the podcast everywhere. And I hope that you do and share it. You know that healing overflows onto others as you share. Okay, so our broadcast today has three guests. They are art therapists. I'm so excited to introduce them. They are my friends and my colleagues. I have Megan Cook, Patti, Ghubril, and Angelica Joy Miskanin, and I will have them introduce themselves. But before I do, put your hands together. You know how to do it. I want to hear the crowd roar. Welcome my guests here to Healing Overflow. Oh, they're so excited. You hear that? It's all for you. I'm going to start with Angelica, and then we'll move on to Patti. Introduce yourself. Tell the viewers and tell the listeners, who are you? What do you do?
So I'm Angelica. I am an art therapist. I specialize in trauma, specifically from violence and crime. I work at Jewish Family and Community Service. My job was created to serve anyone who was impacted by the synagogue shooting on October 27, 2018.
Wow, okay. Thank you. And Patti?
So, hi, I'm Patti Ghubril, and I'm a professor of art therapy at Seton Hill University. Also worked with these folks as an art therapist in the field, before that in the field of trauma-informed care. And I supervise some young emerging art therapists who are going into the field as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I am Megan Cook. I am also an art therapist. I work in a group private practice with kids as young as 3, adults as old as in their 80s or however old they want to come see me. Mm-hmm. And then I do some community work in response to the synagogue shooting.
Well, as you can see, there are various levels and various differences in the art therapy, and I wanted to bring you all on because I'm a social worker, and you all are not social workers, but we work together so very well and have taught one another everything. Mm-hmm. Y'all taught me everything I know about art therapy, and I'm forever grateful for that. But I wanted to share what art therapy is, but I also wanted to share, why art. I wanted to talk about why it's so important, and it's something that I learned along the way, why art is so important to incorporate in your life. And I said, these are the only 3 people that I know that can explain such a thing. I happen to think they're the best. I happen to think that. I think it's absolutely true. And so thank y'all for being here today. I want to start with you, Patti. Why art? Why am I saying art is so important? You must incorporate art in your life.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having us, Toya. This is super exciting to be with you all together here. Well, I think we all have had some experiences with art in our life, whether it's visual art or music or a poem or piece of writing, a movie, anything that's really moved us in some way. Human beings are storytellers. This is an important part of who we are, and our art is one of the most important ways that we get our stories across and our emotional experiences. There's an emerging field in neuroscience called neuroaesthetics that's kind of gaining some traction, and that's a branch of neuroscience that studies the way art impacts us and how it impacts our brain specifically. And one of the things they've discovered is that the pleasure center of the brain lights up when we look at art or when we experience beauty. And so we get sort of this reward in our brain when we are surrounded by something that we find inspiring. So, it could be visual art, of course, but all the arts have this ability to move us in that way.
That is wonderful. Okay, Healing Overflow family, y'all know all about the neurological impact of trauma, all about the brain, because we talked about that in a few podcasts back. So I love the fact that art therapy actually has some science behind it. There was a rumor, I want to say 10 years or so ago, that like art therapy, it was just you in there playing or doing crafts and stuff. Absolutely not true. It's evidence-based, and I love the fact that you shared that. I'm a singer. So that's my art, and I never thought that I was an artist until folks said, well, that is art. So I write. I love writing poetry and stories and things like that, but I sing all the time, and I can feel the healing power of music and using the art. But I was so reluctant to touch paint. And, I would do a crayon, but I'm not coloring out the lines. I'm not doing that. Like that's, that's been embedded in my head. So I never thought about art therapy until I met you all. And so I'm going to turn this question to Megan. Like, what is art therapy? I didn't know what art therapy was.
Yeah, I think the best way that I have found to describe it is that within the field of mental health, art therapy is its own discipline, much like social work, much like marriage and family, all of the other evidence-based, except that it uses art as the process and catalyst of change and healing. And so it really engages the clients, the therapist, in the creative process. It's less about outcome or are we going to hang this image that we made in the Carnegie Museum. And it's more about the process and the feeling you get in your body, much like you said with singing. It's the process, it's the sensory aspect, and that is the catalyst for change and healing.
Wow. Okay, so now, I know a lot about art therapy because of y'all, but now I'm hearing some new stuff today, so it's making me a little bit excited, like, really, what? I love the techniques that y'all taught me. I love the fact that I could engage with the client as well, and I had to get over my fear, and I want to talk about that fear for a second. The fear, we had this exchange, Patti. When Patti first came, I met Patti first. We all worked in the same agency, and I met Patti first, and I was like, an art therapist? What is that? And I'm like, you have to do CBT or psychodynamic theory, or, because I that's how I was raised as far as my schooling, psychology and social work. And then I saw this art therapy thing, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm a little afraid of art. And I didn't quite say that, but when you had like pens and colored pencils and markers and paint, I was like this with my hands. I can't touch it. What do I do with that? And I remember sharing with you, I didn't know where it came from, but there was this reluctance to engage in art. And that's the look you gave me. And then she put out all of these different tools and canvas and paper and paint, and she said, just go and explore where it takes you. And then she closed the door and walked out. I said, where are you going? I can't do it. And there was paint, and it was messy. And I remember dipping a little teeny paint brush, like the smallest one I could find, dip it in the paint and put a little mark on the little canvas. And I started to explore with the colors, and then I start moving to the bigger paintbrush. I was in there, like, by the time she came back, I had a whole canvas full of my art, and that's something I had never done before. But I had this, what you called an inner critic. The inner critic said, you are not an artist. You cannot paint and draw. What is that? You're going outside the lines. It doesn't look right or good. You're not selling it somewhere in Carnegie Museum. So why are you doing this? And you gave me that permission, and then you two came and did the same with you're expressing yourself, and whatever yourself is looking like, that is good. And I'm like, oh. So what ended up happening with those two paintings. I did two. I ended up doing two. I was just going bizarre in there. And I gave them to my children. They still have them hanging up in the room. Like, I was really proud of that. Like, I did that. But one thing that I did feel was a release of stress. And I said, what just happened here? Like, that was even better than, I journal. But sometimes journaling too long and putting too much down, it can overwhelm you. But I didn't feel that overwhelming feeling. And then I started using it with my clients, and I felt a bond. I started feeling like I was connecting with my clients. Now, mind y'all, I am not an art therapist. Was not, had no schooling classes whatsoever. But these three taught me things, little things along the way, as I asked. I asked a lot, too. So I want to just talk about that a little bit as far as art therapist techniques and being an art therapist. Like, what drew you? Did you have a quote-unquote art talent, or did you feel like this is a way that I could really reach people? So, Angelica, I'm going to give that one to you. Like, why art therapist? How did you know you wanted to be an art therapist?
It was, a really gradual process for me. I have a little bit of a unique background compared to some of the folks, at least in my cohort. When I was in graduate school at Seton Hill, my background, my bachelor's degree is in costume design for the theater.
What?
I'm a self-taught artist, mostly. I never took any formal art classes. After leaving graduate school, graduating from Point Park with my bachelor's degree, I ended up having to get a real job because it's not like costume design positions are aplenty in this city. But so I ended up working with a group of teens with special needs at the JCC. And from there, ended up working as a foster care and adoption caseworker, also at JFCS. So for many years, while I was also freelance designing for theaters around the city, I was also growing an experience working in social services. And it was through that work that I found the most meaning. But I always had this art background. And from the time I was probably a senior about to graduate, I heard of this notion of art therapy, and I took out a couple books from the library, just, what could I understand more about it? And I was really afraid at the time that it would mean that, becoming an art therapist meant that, like, someone draws a picture and then I interpret it for them. But the good news, at least to me, is that it's not like a tarot card reading, which I say quite a lot. It's really not about that at all. And so, anyway, I ended up exploring that a lot more, particularly through the work that I did at JFCS, being a foster care and adoption caseworker. And I took a bit of a plunge and got my prereqs, which meant I had to take formal art classes finally, and started the program in 2011. And it turned out, when I say it was a leap, I really wasn't entirely sure if it would be the right fit for me. And luckily, it really, truly has been. So it really marries those two worlds together for me.
Absolutely. And like I said, to the Healing Overflow family, I tend to believe that you all are the best at it, working with trauma survivors in various ways. I saw art therapy work, and for a lot of us that were trained in another discipline, we are looking like, what are they doing over there? And they're playing, or they're, And when I saw how joining what I've been trained in is CBT and psychodynamic theory and Gestalt and things like that. What I saw is, as I began to learn from you art therapists, we started to combine what I knew, because I didn't know art therapy, what I knew, and then what you knew, and we started exchanging information, So I want to talk about that with you, Patti, because we've done so many trainings. We said we could combine it. Like, why aren't we using both? You don't have to say, oh, we're just using CBT here. That's not usually how a therapist works. We're very eclectic. We use what works. I saw art therapy work, and there's evidence that it works. So talk about a little bit, and feel free, to use examples and how we did that. But just talk about a little bit how we combine these treatment models and, use different techniques and help people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Toya, you've been so gracious in talking about the ways that you learned from us, but my goodness, we learned so much from you and continue to.
So much.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, I mean, I think social workers bring this amazing systems approach to their work that sort of opens up the worldview of like what our clients are actually experiencing, not just in the moment that they're coming to us, but all the layers of their life and what their needs are beyond what sitting in my office for an hour would be with them. So, it's just been an amazing synergy, I think, for all of us to learn from each other. But yes, I think when you're working with a team of therapists, and we had the rich experience of having, I think, about 10 therapists on our team at one time together, maybe more, and you're sitting around and hearing people's case presentations and stories, and we're all working towards the same goal, which is to help these clients with their trauma symptoms to get back to some sort of new normal, right? So anything we can do to help one another just feels like that's what we should be doing. As well as you always saying, Toya, but I stay in my lane, right? Like
Right.
there's things that I wouldn't venture to do because I don't know enough, or I wouldn't want to open up a Pandora's box for my client. But there's so many ways we can work together. And like you said, we have done a lot of trainings together. We've done a lot of self-care kind of workshops for mental health providers who are dealing with their own vicarious trauma and stress. And CBT and art therapy, for just one example, work incredibly well together. And there's now research about that. And I think going back to the brain science for just a moment, what that offers when you work with a very structured approach of CBT, which helps people kind of move through a journey, and there's so much educational richness in that model in terms of knowing what's happening to you and then having a plan for working through it. But the art therapy brings this kind of whole brain approach of getting your senses involved and your emotions kind of a way to kind of tap into that and then move that through your body. So if we think of trauma as a brain-body experience, then we need brain-body interventions, right? And that's that integrative approach you're talking about.
Definitely. And what we know about trauma, so we're all trauma heads around the table. That's how we formed our bond. Not a trauma bond, but we formed that's a corny trauma joke.
Trauma recovery
bond. Trauma recovery bond. And we used what worked. We went into this basket, always tell my students, I have this big black basket or this big black bag of things, and we pull out something and we use them with clients, and if it doesn't work, it's a big black basket. Like, we just keep going there. I don't know why I named it black, but it's black.
Why not? Yeah. That's right.
And we just keep using things and tools and methods until it works with that individual, and each individual is different. And so what I want the viewing and the listening audience to understand is, if you're seeking therapy, there are various methods and models and techniques, and you can find what works for you and find what engages with you to work out the brain and the body. And a lot with trauma in particular, it sticks in your body. You have that somatic symptoms. You feel it in your muscles, in your body. It's the cortisol, adrenaline, it's all that stuff. A lot of time, the arts in general, movement, I use drumming, I use tones and vocal tones and voices, I use art. All those things are just getting it from here to here so that you're not struggling so much with it in your brain and in your body. So combining it was a no-brainer. It was like combine and double, triple, quadruple it up, do what we have to do, for what works. the therapists that are watching, you can do that. You can connect and bind together different modalities for your clients so that it's useful and it works. We don't want to do anything that doesn't work. Why would we be therapists if we're like, what are we doing? It doesn't really work, but let's do it anyway. Makes no sense. So I had the question when I first started doing art therapist techniques. I said, this is just for children. Just children want to paint and color. And then Megan, in particular, you heard the age range, y'all, 30 to 80.
Yeah.
Not me. Like, I was the teen girl, love my teenagers. But that 3 itty-bitty teeny weeny, no thanks. That's why Megan was the person. Angelica, I think you saw teeny. You all saw teeny weenies, huh? Yeah. I was like, would y'all like the teeny weenies?
Three and up. I
Three
think
and
it
up.
was.
Yeah,
3 and up.
Yeah, mine was more like 6. I was like, 6 and 7 and up. Let's go. But what I want to ask Megan, like, who does art therapy work for and help? And I know the answer. I'm kind of setting it up because I thought just children. And then I started to, use it, and you taught me a lot of that. So I want you to go ahead and, give us an example of a client if you like, without, we disclose no information or anything like that. But who does art therapy help?
Short answer, everyone and anyone who is willing to engage.
Yes.
And that includes folks with limited mobility. There are ways to adjust and accommodate. And so you don't just have to be that quintessential able-bodied, creative-minded person. Like I said, I use art therapy with 3-year-olds. I use it with 80-year-olds. It can help folks in a number of settings, from what clearly is our bread and butter, the trauma work, the interpersonal work. But it can help in community settings, group projects, community engagement with art projects. It can help in hospital settings and stroke recovery, and you name it, there is a way to make art therapy happen in a lot of different settings.
Okay, so give us a story.
Okay.
Y'all know I'm the best storyteller. However, I will yield the storytelling floor to my friends. So
so I can give a couple broader stories, and then I'll give a specific story. With my littles, those teeny tinies, as you called them, the natural language of teeny tinies is play and art and sensory engagement. And so the ways that I use art with those littles is with sensory engagement and regulation, and helping them get back to their bodies, and helping them learn how to use their bodies to regulate, so that they have those internal tools. Older folks tend to, as you noted when Patti was like, here are some art things. Older folks go, I can't color out of the lines. What are you talking about?
Classic.
What it can really, it's such a fun way to bring playfulness back into the world, especially after a trauma. It can almost make you feel like you're walking through a world that's only in black and white. And so it can absolutely bring that playfulness and joy back in. In regards to teens, I have this stark recollection of this kiddo that I worked with, and he was actually the one that I presented my culminating project in graduate school. And this kiddo was so disconnected from their body. And this kiddo was 6 foot plus. So we laid a big old paper down and we traced their body. And we spent a number of weeks exploring where they felt each of their emotions and turning it into lines and shapes and colors. And this person mapped it on that big outline.
Wow.
And so presenting that, having this 6 foot art piece of someone's lived experience of their emotions that helped them reconnect, like you said, that brain body after a trauma is such a fantastic, it was humbling, it was awe-inspiring to see a teen be able to do this.
That big.
that big.
Like, can you imagine someone that tall, that big, going through the trauma and feeling just lost in that big body, and being able to map out the big body and say, this is what I'm feeling all the way through.
Yes.
Wow, I would have loved it.
It was, I was already bought in. Obviously, I'm 3 years into school, but that really kind of solidified and cemented it.
I see why.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I have used techniques that you all taught me with the older population. I've used them with little ones, not as little as y'all, but little enough. And I have noticed that adults light up. Like they liked using it. They were really engaged. One in particular, I remember a teenager and an adult. And they had nightmares. And with trauma, often you will have those reoccurring nightmares that keep trying to work itself out. It keeps replaying over and over again. And we used art therapy with them. And they were able, the older gentleman was able to put it on canvas and not interpret the art. I didn't interpret, that's what I thought it was too. But he interpreted himself. Like, this is what this nightmare was about. This is what I couldn't verbalize. This is what I've been suffering with every night. Another story I have, I told you I got to take my story rein back. My story thing. I work with a teenager, and she lost her mother to just a domestic violence situation, and she lost her to homicide. And she came in and could not speak, did not speak, refused to speak. And I remember running to y'all like, you want to talk? Like, what do I do? And what I found out is she was speaking. I just needed to find her language. And so verbally expressing how horrified she was, that's not something she could do. So she was being aggressive and punching holes through walls and not able to really speak to the folks that were raising her at that point. And she came in not talking to me, and I remember setting up an easel and a big canvas and all paints and all different size paint brushes, and she walked in to the therapy room, and I just pointed. I said, well, I'm not talking either. We're going to speak another language today. And I pointed to the paintbrushes and easel, and she looked at me and she was like, what am I supposed to do with that? And I went like that. And then she picked up the thickest paintbrush, and she started to paint a rose, which I was really surprised by. Like, oh, we have a rose. And she's painting it, and it was pretty. And I'm doing some art on the side. What do you call that, y'all, when I'm doing some art also with the person? Do you call that something?
Parallel
art
with
making.
them.
Yeah.
Doing some art with the people. So I'm doing the parallel art making on the side, and I'm glancing up, and I'm looking to see what she's doing. And she made the rose and the leaves, and she put the paintbrush down. Then she picked up the thickest paintbrush there and dipped it in black and swirled black all the way through the rose. And I went inside, like, what is that? What is happening? She did that, and I didn't stop the process because I was taught right. And then she slammed the paintbrush down, and she looked at me. Now, if that wasn't communication, I don't know what was. And then I said, talk about this. Tell me about this. And she was able to talk about it being a nightmare of her mom, and the black clouds coming in was losing her mom. And that's the nightmare she was having that she couldn't verbalize every night. After that, we started to deal with that, that trauma and that nightmare, and she was able to start to get back in, to her own body and her own behaviors and actions and release some of that anger. And we used art therapy the whole rest of the time, all art therapy techniques. I was running to each office. I need something else. Y'all giving me books. I'm like, okay, I'm using it. And it really, really helped her. I had opportunity to see her years later, and she was doing so well, graduated from high school and all that. So I also, besides using it with little ones and teenagers, I used it in groups too. And so Patti and I had an opportunity to do some art therapist type techniques and work with teenagers in the sex assault surviving group. you also told me about some groups that you did in the community. I would love for you to share that with everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think group work is so powerful because the members themselves are providing sort of that catalyst of change for each other, that support that, especially after traumatic events, there is that sense of, a broken world in some ways, and meaning has been shattered. And so to be with other people and use sometimes this language of creativity, because words are not enough often. They just don't do it for us after really intense experiences. So there's just such a lovely bond that can happen with people. And I just love group work. I especially love working with women in groups. And one of the groups I think that you're talking about, I actually did while I was still in grad school. We called it Art and Soul, but it was a group of women. I live on the north side and have for many years. And in my community, there are just so many lovely, wonderful people. Many of them have experienced some loss or tragedy due to community violence. And so I wanted to get some of these women together, and because they're so amazing and brilliant, and just to give them the opportunity to find a way back to their own innate creativity, which is always there. It just gets buried sometimes. So we worked for a year together in a program called Art and Soul, and they just used the art as a reminder of the strengths that they had, to celebrate kind of who they were, celebrate their resilience, celebrate their, just all the things in their life that they still had, I guess, is a way to put it. And then they ended up wanting to do, so as Megan was saying earlier, we've talked about art therapy is not usually about making art that's presented somewhere, but it was really moving to me that towards the end of this year together, they were like, we want an art show. And I was like, well, it's your process, so you want an art show. So they created some art that was specifically for them to put up and share with their community, which I thought was really powerful. And then they made a mural together, too, to leave in the community. So, I think that's also for the therapist a really powerful part of group work, is that if it's going well, they don't need you after a while. They're just like, we know what we need to do, and you just let them do that.
That's empowering.
It's empowering.
It is empowering.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
It's really powerful work on different levels. As a social worker, we talk about micro, meso, macro levels.
Yeah.
Y'all all just cover that, using art therapy and using art therapy techniques. So you don't have to be trained, but you do if you call yourself an art therapist.
Yes.
You have to have all those letters after your name and all that training. But there are techniques that you can use at home, and you can use to really, like I talked about my experience, feeling less stress, feeling free, feeling proud. I was proud of what I created. I've since used, I'm all advanced now. Like I use all kind of paints, and I have it at home. I have my children involved in using art and expressing their feelings. I use clay. I love all of those things, and it's so super helpful just to de-stress. And so I asked Angelica to first talk about some of the work that you've done. You mentioned at the top of the show that you worked with the Jewish community, and that's so meaningful, and I wanted to talk about your community work as well. And then Angelica is going to do a demonstration of some things that you can use. I always talk about Dr. Toy tips and just giving you a little something that you can use within your home. And so the brains came together and came up with something that you can use to help with stress. We did have an Ask a Therapist question, and you will win your Starbucks gift card, by the way. I want to combine your question with this demonstration, because the question is, what are some other things I can do instead of biting my nails, anxiety-induced? Well, this is one thing that you can do. And so I want to hand it over the rest of the show. I'm messing with you. To Angelica, talk about some of the work you did with the Jewish population, but also show us what we can do right there in our home, and what do we need to kind of build our newfound love for art?
In terms of my work with the Jewish community, I've actually been part of the Jewish community since I moved to Pittsburgh in, I think it was the year 2000. I started off as a babysitter and worked for many years with many, many different families, worked at the JCC, worked at JFCS, and then after the synagogue shooting at Tree of Life in 2018, I had the great honor of taking a position or being offered a position at JFCS as a psychotherapist there, art therapist who specializes in trauma. And like Megan, I continue to work across the lifespan, not quite as young as 3. But I do work with folks who are, kiddos all the way up into their 80s, some of my clients.
Wow.
And not all of them engage, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Megan mentioned, anyone can do art therapy as long as they're willing to engage, and not all of my clients are really interested, and so pull in other modalities for for those folks. But a lot of them are willing to engage on an individual basis, and there's a lot of movement that comes from that process. Having experienced a community trauma is in some ways a really different sort of experience because I work. I think Megan does too. We work with people in different concentric circles of impact. And so that varies widely in terms of what kind of work is appropriate for them, art therapy or otherwise. And I've also co-facilitated groups. Patti was just talking about doing group work. So we've done, during the pandemic, we started mindfulness and meditation groups, as well as a group we called Creativity Break. And so it was all via Zoom. What's interesting about that is that it really does, we can't provide the materials for folks, right? So we were talking about this, all 3 of us, there are 4 of us, I can count. Recently, wanting to be able to offer directives or ideas for folks who just have what they have at home and utilizing that. So maybe that, I don't know if I answered your question fully about my work with the Jewish community.
You did.
Because it really is, I'm not sure exactly what, there's
Well,
so
it
much
was
to
broad.
that.
You did a lot and for so long. But yes, I just wanted you to talk about that great work. Okay, I'm anxious to get to the demonstration. I want to see.
So
they haven't showed me, and I'm going to be participating in this. So I'm
You're
excited.
the guinea pig here. So, having said, I need my microphone. Having said that, we want folks to be able to utilize any practice with what materials they have. We did bring some larger paper, 2 sizes actually here today. But if you have just a notebook.
I'm Vanna Black, y'all.
Nice.
Whatever paper you have available to you, whether it's copy or paper, whatever you have at home is, utilize what you got. In this case, I think an ideal situation is to use a little bit larger paper for this particular directive, but it doesn't require a ton of technical skill. It doesn't, what it really, and we've got oil pastels, but you can use crayons. Ideally, you want something with color, and that's what I say to folks who have been part of our community art-making groups via Zoom, is that, if you simply have a pencil at home, then use that pencil. But if you do have something with color, maybe it's 2 different kind of magic markers, then use that, because color can really, having that option for color can really enhance the process for you. But you can use anything for this particular directive. You can use chalk pastels, crayons, oil pastels. You can use finger paints and any other materials that you might have. Now, what I'm going to be introducing here briefly is called, it's a guided drawing technique. But when I first heard that term, and this comes from, I've learned this technique from a book called Healing Trauma with Guided Drawing by Cornelia Elbrecht. And so I started learning these skills from this particular book. What I've learned is that guided piece, when she talks about guided drawing, the guidance is actually coming from within you. It's not from me. right, as a therapist.
Okay.
And we all know this, being therapists, that we're not here to necessarily guide the way. We're here to partner with our clients and help hold that space for them. So this kind of guided drawing really does rely on you turning inward. This is a mindfulness exercise. It's also referred to as an active meditation. So it's guided by your inner force, even if that can be hard to pinpoint sometimes. And why this is good with trauma is because it really does ask you to really tune in and utilize what's going on for you. So I'm going to ask Toya in just a moment to tune into her own body, really start to sense inward.
Wherever my stress is.
Now, keep in mind, there are a couple of things that I want to say about this before we begin, and I don't want to bore your viewers at all, but just some important points. So when we talk about utilizing this with folks who have been survivors of trauma, we know that sometimes that tuning inward can be a terrifying process, right? Because it can feel like there's a threat there, tuning into the body. So we really need to be super sensitive to that, and I would ask all viewers to also, really check in and notice if there's some resistance to doing that. But overall, what we really want to do in trauma work is help people become a little bit safer, feeling a lot safer in their bodies, and utilizing that inner sense and that inner guidance. So what this requires, I know. So I think I know what color you're going to pick.
Wonder why I picked that color.
She needs two, though, right?
So tuning, yes, you actually do need two. And what we're going to be doing here is actually a bilateral process, okay? And I have some little bit of information as to why we do that. The bilateral process, using both hands in this, activates both hemispheres of the brain. They're both stimulated. And this increases communication across the corpus callosum, so we know that this helps to sort of integrate things for us as time goes on. But what I want to ask you to do first, Toya, before you start any kind of movement on the paper, is take a moment, whether you close your eyes or not, but just start to tune in to your body. And start to notice anything that comes up for you, whether it be discomfort or tension in the body somewhere. It could be a feeling of flow in the body, of relaxation. It doesn't just have to be, pain or discomfort. And it might be something that's calling your attention in particular. Okay, so while you might be sensing different kinds of things in the body, see if you can pinpoint one that really sort of stands out to you. And when you're ready, I want to invite you to take both of those colors, one in each hand, which might feel awkward for your viewers who are listening. Know that this may feel uncomfortable and awkward at first because we're used to using our dominant hand, particularly in art making and writing, etc. So, just if you can, embrace that discomfort a little bit at first and start to create some movements that may be able to mimic what you're noticing. What sense is that in the body? Do they need to be circular? I know. I was like, do we need a paper weight on the paper? Keep that in mind, too, because your paper might want to move and shift. You can consider, there we go, okay. So I see that Toya is creating she created some circular patterns. And you're experimenting too. This is the first time you've ever done this, so I want to just point out that that's also a really important part of the process, is experimentation, just letting yourself feel your way through it. No worries about making any mistakes, right? Okay. So as you move through this kind of process, it's really about, again, it's about tuning in to the body. And then as you pause and look at your paper, you get to start to see, are there associations? Does this feel true for the experience in my body?
Absolutely does.
It does?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when we work with clients, I know we're only doing this for just a couple of minutes to give you a sense of what does this feel like? What is this like? What are we really doing here? What are we doing with it? It's process over product, right? Because we're not hanging this in a museum. You can. It's beautiful. I love it.
Thank you.
But it really is about deepening that sense of tuning inward and being able to convey that. And in doing so, the hope is that we start to reset the nervous system and start to get it more in balance because you're paying attention. And what do you need? What do you need? Do you need to do flicks to release, right? Like, do you need to do massaging, as they call it in the book? There's a massage process. Like, if you're turning into, like, pain in the shoulders
That's what I
and
was
you start to
doing.
massage, how does it feel to massage that out on paper?
I was massaging
And
y'all.
does your body respond in kind, right?
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting, it doesn't require, as you can see, it doesn't require, like, technical skill.
Right.
But it does require the skill of being able to look inside and sense inside.
That part was really important. I felt like taking the time. We often do not take the time to sit still and notice what we feel in our body. I felt like that was essential, and I've never done this before, but I felt like that was essential in order to be able to draw and put what was in. This feels like this is what is going on in my body. Like, completely. And I don't think I would have been able to tap into that unless I took the time to stop. And I do a lot of touching my chest and just in my hands and making myself aware of, like, what I'm feeling in the moment. So that's something I do a lot, is put my hand on my chest and breathe.
Me too.
And once I felt that, my hands were like, I'm doing this. And then you started to name it. Like, it was in the book, which was really fascinating to me. You said massaging. That's how I started out. That was the process for me. And then I know exactly what these marks mean. I know exactly what this is. I know what this is, because this is the feeling. I know what this is as well.
Yeah.
And it's a mix of emotion, but it's that was good. that was really good. That was really interesting. And then one thing that we tend to do as just people is to fix things. Now I see this and I need to fix it, or I need to say why. And I found out through art techniques that you don't need to fix and answer why. You just need to say this, let it be what it is. Yeah. I learned a lot.
Process over product is what I was saying before, which I know can be really difficult for a lot of people. They want it to look pretty, and I like my stuff to look pretty too, but just consider what is the movement doing for you all by itself. So
That was wonderful.
I think, too, what was interesting is hearing you then tell us, I know what all these things are for me, because that is so important for our clients to realize is we don't know. We art therapists we don't have some magic, like you said, tarot card reading skill.
We
No.
don't.
We stand alongside our clients while they discover and name what is happening for them.
And sometimes
support
that naming is internal, and we never know. We
that's
will
right.
never know, and that's okay.
And that's okay, too. Absolutely.
Yeah, I noticed that when I told y'all I know what this means. Y'all went, No one said, well, what is it and what's going on? Let me hurry up and fix it, because it feels fixed to me. It being here, I'm very satisfied with it. I don't know if you noticed, I went like,
yeah,
Yeah.
I did.
that's it.
Yeah, something moved through you.
I felt very satisfied with it.
I want to point out, too, that this is, I know you had said, Toya, earlier about the marriage of different modalities and theories. And Angelica, as you were talking about bilateral work, that marries so greatly with EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is one of those, really big gold standards of trauma work right now. And it's just another point of art making isn't just this woo-woo hippie kind of a thing. Like you said, there is evidence base to what we do and why we do it.
Absolutely. So And I thank you so much for this demonstration. For those listening and watching, this is something we talk about trauma because we are trauma experts and trauma therapists. But this is something you can do if you're feeling any type of distress. And so for my viewer and my listener that is biting your nails, that's anxiety-based and very good noticing and knowing that that's your anxiety kicking up. This is something that was very calming and soothing for me. Angelica's voice is phenomenal. I don't know how you're going to get that in your brain. Replay the end of this, but I already told her get like into a studio and make some recordings
That's
because
why they tasked me with the mindfulness meditation
That's
stuff.
right.
I'm like, I had to do it again.
I know.
They're like, put people to sleep, Angelica. Come on.
this is what you're like, huh. But you can do this with your daily stress, your job, school, your relationships, your life in general, and take some time for yourself. This is a beautiful self-care exercise. Take some time to take care of you because you come first. You can't give to others if you are depleted. So this is something that was really quick within about 5 minutes, and it helped me to get out what was all in there. So I thank you for that demonstration. I thank you, the Dream Team, for coming here to Healing Overflow with Dr. Toy podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thoroughly enjoyed you visiting with us. I hope that you will share and come back. Continue to watch every first and third Thursday. You get a new podcast, and you can continue to watch the old ones through the link tree. If you have a Healing Overflow with Dr. Toy question, Ask the Therapist segment, you can email me at toyaj@pitt.edu, or you can click on the Qualtrics link and put your question in there, as many questions as you like. I have lots of questions, so thank you for sending those. And of course, you get your Starbucks gift card. We all need our Starbucks gift card, so be sure to tune in. But most importantly, y'all, keep healing so that your healing overflows onto everyone. Thank you so much, and see you again. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you,
Thank
Toya.
you.
Thank y'all.
Thanks for having us.
Woo!